So good day, everyone. Today is the first book club meeting from Nebula House, and we have three very very special guests here. And we have myself, Kelechi, the convener or founder of the Nebula House. We have Joshua. We have two Joshuas. We have Joshua.
Josh.
Okay, we have Josh, and I like to call this Joshua JP. These are my friends from school and way back, and I have Emeka, who also is a very close friend of mine. These are very, very intelligent, highly intelligent people. Today, the book we are actually discussing is Man's Sexual Meaning, Viktor Frankl. The book, in summary, is about the survival of a man's writing on how he survived the Holocaust and his observations of other survivors and what they held on to and what made them survive, what made them go through this very treacherous and nefarious event, coming out not just stronger, but coming out with a better sense of purpose. And Viktor Frankl was a prisoner during the World War II, and his book Man's Sexual Meaning has sold over 10 million books, I guess. And we're here to discuss it because we're in the month of, or in the period of existentialism at the Nebula House, the sexual meaning. Why are we here? How and why do we draw meaning? One of the most important quotes from Viktor Frankl is he was referencing Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why can survive just about anyhow. So, welcome. And again, if you have any questions, if you have comments, if you have suggestions on the books that we should read during the course of this period, let us know. So, welcome everyone. I think we want to start with the general reading experience. I would like to start with you, JP.
Okay.
So, when I contacted you regarding the book club, and you were very excited to join without even knowing what the book was. Thank you. But when I told you about Man's Sexual Meaning, and I'm guessing you got the book. What was your general reading experience like?
Okay, so even before I got the book, when you told me the name of the book, Man Search for Meaning, I mean, it was, at first it was like a challenge because, I mean, ever since I became an adult, that's been a question on my mind. Like, sometimes I'll just break down, like, what's the point of all this? Like, why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
So, for you to say, okay, this book is, the author of this book is about to tell me what, like, the search for meaning is and, like, how to go about it. Like, it was a challenge. And, I mean, yes, as I said, I was excited before, but when you told me the name of the book, I was even more excited.
Yeah.
So, when I saw that, the author had gone through what he had gone through and that was what he was going to write about, it made me like more interested because the truth is that we find more meaning from failure. I mean, it's even a quote that we find more meaning from failure than we do from success.
Mm-hmm.
So reading about, his experiences in the camp, and the way he wrote about it, it's intriguing because he wrote about it from a hopeful perspective.
Yeah, very optimistic.
Not from a hateful perspective.
Yeah.
Like you expect that somebody who has gone through that will hate everything, will be very bitter, but he was writing it like someone that was writing like a story about good things that happened. So that was very intriguing for me, and that opened my mind a lot.
Yeah, just one of you.
Yeah, similar to what is already identified. I think it was when you contacted me that you were going to do this and more so this book. It was one of those books I've heard of that I've already interacted with. Yeah, not properly read and gone through it and seen it on some podcasts. And yeah. But when I got into it, two things stood out for me. So the way I read book was one, it was a situation where I could see it from his perspective and that of the prisoners suffering they had to go through. I could also see from the perspective of that's something they had to go through at the hand of the capos and the other guys. I could also see it from the perspective of how the recipients of our actions, whether we feel like we are the victims, affect other people. So it was quite fascinating for me because at various instances in the human journey, we tend to feel that we are going through these things, and so maybe we're entitled to act in a certain way to other people because having bad, these people probably have it fine because on the surface level it looks like they're doing all right. So that was the first thing that stood out to me because if you look at the first page, it talked about how some of the prisoners had morphed into very egregious minded people, and it was fascinating. So the second experience that I had was the categorization of humanity. It was the decent and indecent. It wasn't a thing of race, wasn't a thing of status, wasn't a thing of so those experiences kind of sparked what was already there in fact. It rekindled something I really knew, which is humanity, human experiences are particular to a specific human being, but the only thing we can do is to make the right decision or to choose the decision we make in a specific set of instances. And so those were the things that primarily stood out for me.
Yeah, Emeka, what of you?
Yeah, I think it's a good book. I've read the book about 3 times at this point. I think I read it a long time ago, and then this is like the third time I've read it because of this. But it's my favorite book, so it's easy, and I like it because generally I think it's well. I like books. I have a fascination for like the war stories of World War II, and the reason I think is because I think that is when you see humanity in its as open, right? Like I feel like in times of chaos is when you see what humanity really is. It's not what people are trying to do, what people are trying to present, it's just what people are. Because there's nothing to you're not trying to hype yourself or to show off to anyone. You're just trying to basically survive. And I think it's in that survival state that you get the best and the worst of people. So that's why I think that's why I find the book fascinating. And another thing is the mind is what you put a professional into a place where it's meant to be suffering and it's just working. So when you read the book, is a professional writing the book. And even in that place, he was actually working. So I find that very interesting. I actually admire that. Even while suffering, like untold suffering was going on, the man was functioning like a psychologist. Like he was basically profiling people. And nothing is how relatable it is. And I'm not saying that I've been in Auschwitz or any of this, but like I strongly believe that there are character types. And in life, you go through life and you see, in my opinion, it's like 5 character types. And anytime you see a person, you can kind of like slot them into this character type. And then when you read the book, you're like, you read about people you've met before. Not that they are like, they will shoot you or they'll kill you or whatever, but like they exhibit the kind of character type that you can trait, that you can put on this character. And you're like, I've met this character before. So I think it's a very, very fascinating book. And I think that, and again, I think the message, like I said, it's the question of what is meaning, right? I don't think the question will be answered. I don't think the question has been answered. I think, I'm not getting my opinion. I think that things are meaningful only so far as we attach meaning to them. Other than that, I would say something very nihilistic. Everything is meaningless.
That's all.
Things are only meaningful when you put any kind of meaning to them. So I like the book. What I like about it is the third, this is where it says meaning. You can find meaning in how you react to suffering. I think that's correct. I think that's one universal thing that I think anybody can take from the book that can help. Because whether the adventure, you might not be able to have adventure and experiences. It can be limited to where you're from. You might not necessarily have this crazy experience. You might spend your life, and it's true, life is cruel. You might spend your life struggling to find food, and that will be your whole life. But I think everybody can react. Everybody can pick up on that message on how we react to suffering. And I think for me, that's
So what you said is quite interesting because there's a part of the book where, and I'm not sure I'm going to get his exact word, where he said meaning of life is not what you ask life, but rather what life asks you. So it's a view to figure it out. So sometimes in the search for meaning, we are looking outward and we're trying to say, okay, well, why am I here? And it's a question you ask and expecting an answer from external being. Someone to come and say, okay, this is why you're here. But what he put, and I think that was a very interesting quote. He was like, life is the one asking you the question actually for you to figure it out. And from my own reading experience, one of the things I find fascinating, I've read the book a couple of times, and to your point on the archetypes, I find it very interesting because when I look at the code of the couples, right, these were prisoners who were given an elevated position in the constitutional camp, and he noted that they were even more nefarious. And it's interesting because it's almost this when when I read that particular line, it made me realize that, like you said about survival, it's everybody's in this very civil world. We are all putting on a suit and tie, putting on what I can call it, a facade or a cosplay of of civilization. And when people throw you into a very hard condition, then you begin to see those little signs. And we see this in our everyday life. Someone who maybe either in secondary school, someone gets a professional position or a position of power, and suddenly, they begin to do things worse than they already do.
I mean, just to add something to what you're saying, he's actually noted something. He said, best of us did not make it out of there. So essentially, everybody who had to survive to something.
Survive, yes.
Ordinarily, we don't do exactly. Yeah, so I think it's a unifier amongst human beings that when humans at most days are form, you are faced with a decision. Yes. To do something that might not be most moral. Yeah. Or to stick to your guns and maybe will to the seconds. So it depends on the decision. And sometimes it might turn out good, like he did for this. There was a time he was about to 60 down, but he decided not to escape. And that's helped him. So never can tell.
Yeah, but also you see the thing I find interesting though is how something he said, and it almost made me think about the nihilist point of view, where he said people who had a bet, like they had a form of optimism that they were going to get out, life was going to be. Even he mentioned a particular prisoner who said he had a vision, a dream that was going to be March 29th, and he was happy after the vision. But after March 29th, yes, that year, he killed himself. He died. So then I began to ask a very interesting question. Is it at that point, should we hope? And I think this is for you or anyone who actually cares to answer. Is there a problem to be optimistic? To say, okay, I think I'm going to be, typical fashion. By 27, I'll be married. 28, I'll have a car. And so how do we manage our expectations, knowing that life in itself is very convoluted? What things can change quickly, and if we don't make it, like, how are you able to balance that? How are you able to balance having expectations, optimism, and pessimism, and even a bit of nihilism?
So I think, like as I said in the book, you need something to look forward to.
Yeah.
So if you don't look forward to anything, you start dying almost. So it depends on what you hope on,
exactly,
and your chokehold on that hope.
Yeah.
So, like for instance, the example you gave, by 27 I'm married. Yeah. If your chokehold on that hope is that if by 27 I'm not married, then that's that's where the problem is.
Because another thing that I think is, and this might be a bit mystical, right? In that I do think that there's a lot of energy that goes into this thing. Now, depends on what people call it, providence, people call it God, whatever, right? I do think there's a lot of wielding of energy that humans have. I believe humans are conduits to like energies that we can't see, and we can use that energy one way or another. So I do think the person who thinks, for example, 27 I'll be free, has held on to that crazy energy that when it doesn't happen, the spirit breaks. Yeah. Not so much because you've spent an entire month, year, whatever, harnessing that energy of like, 27, this would happen. So I think that if you harness that energy, you can use it. Humans can use it. We have the ability to harness energy and execute those energies. But I do think there's always a chance in every situation that things might not turn out the way you want it to turn out. And I think that is what people don't like to factor in when they make their super plans. Right. But I think based on how the world is, I think it's important to somewhere in the back of your mind factor that
what if it doesn't work?
Right,
What if
it might not work.
It might not work. And what
Right,
do you do if
yes, and what do you do if it doesn't? But it's not to say don't harness all the energy.
Yeah.
Like, how about the faith you can have? How about the belief? Because it's a real thing to actually execute it. But there has to still be that space in your mind that life is cool. And life is cool is not a catchphrase. Life is actually cool. Right. So you should always have that in mind. Right?
Yeah. So do you want to say something? Do you want to say?
Yeah. So I think balance, in my opinion, will be to hope. And so hope, like he has said, look forward to something, because without life meaningless in anywhere, so there's no point in anywhere. But then know the things you're in control of and the things you aren't. So pick your battles.
Yeah.
Now you cannot try to control things that are without your power. Correct. What you can do is control the things that are within your power. So you identify situations. So for instance, you're not married, but there are things to get better. Correct. And life doesn't stop when you're not married. The fact that you're not married at 27 doesn't mean you don't get married. You improve certain areas of your life.
And also to your point, sorry to cut you, that getting married at 27 may be your goal, but may not be the best.
Yeah.
You can aim for something that is
Try to achieve in logotherapy.
in logotherapy.
So it's not about what you so it tries to differentiate logotherapy from psychoanalysis. Yeah, but yeah, I agree in part, but we'll get back to that some other time. But the point I'm trying to draw from there is, instead of going back and reliving the past and seeing where your failures have been, try to determine, okay, what meaning in the future can I derive some form of some form of purpose from. And so that's what I think that's how you can strike the balance between
Very just to read a quote. I mean, I think this kind of highlights the things you said. This is Viktor Frankl. He said, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself." So basically, what he's trying to say, and I think you guys have already made the point, is there are things that we want, there are things that we pursue, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And the only way the spirit doesn't break is if you have a certain level of, I want to say, an anchor in something a bit transcendent, something that it's not in that thing, right? Because, for example, we have all had goals here that we pursue. We actually genuinely pursued them, and we didn't meet them, but here we are. But how we able to? It's okay. Yes, I mean, I didn't get what I was supposed to get, so what happens? And sometimes these things are already embedded into us. We have a community of people who can say, "Oh, JP, don't worry, try again next time," or life moves on, and you have those encouraging factors. But what I find is that when people are so laser focused on happiness, and again, I don't want to even have this conversation about the pursuit of happiness, but my point is, I've come to realize that the people who are happy and more successful didn't necessarily pursue it as a sole goal. It was almost like a byproduct of something else. So I'm really happy to hear all these experiences. But to go to the next section of this particular conversation is, are there any quotes that you want to share? Like maybe 2-3 quotes that you hear from Buddha said that made you think, rethink, or say, well, interesting. I will share one so that I give you guys enough time to think through.
I have one quote, and it's my favorite quote. It's my favorite quote from the book. It goes, instead of possibilities, I've had realities in my past. Not only the reality of work done and of love loved, but of sufferings bravely suffered. These sufferings are even the things of which I'm most proud of. Though these are the things that cannot inspire. And it's my favorite quote from the book.
What a deep statement. Please read it again one more time. Just one more time.
It says, instead of possibilities, I've had realities in my past. Not only the realities of work done and of love loved, but of sufferings bravely suffered. This suffering are even the thing of which I'm most proud of. Though these are things that cannot inspire envy. So I like it because it's a what he's basically saying is, in the highlights of my life, I appreciate the things that have gone wrong. It's very counterintuitive to what you typically hear. It's like, oh, my life was great because I got a car, I got married and stuff. But he places value. For example, you could see through the book, he places value in the things he went through because you can't write as clearly as he writes it without appreciating the kind of poetry, it's weird poetry in that whole thing. Right? So, yes, exactly. So you can't, so I think he really got, and I think this quote captures the mind of the writer that wrote this book.
And I think funny I didn't take note of that quote, but the thing I find interesting is the things that in the last part which he said that does not inspire envy. And I find that interesting because even in our search for meaning, we do not realize the sufferings that come with actually attaining that particular goal. For example, if wants to tell you that to be worth 100 billion, if you have such a lofty goal, and they tell you maybe you have to risk health issues because you're sleeping 3 hours a day and you may not have as much time with your family and friends and you're always going to be under attack. Would you, if you're really aware of all these effects from what you're aiming for, would you really aim for it? And that's why I think it's a very interesting point. He said these are the highlights and these are the things that if I tell you, you'll not be like, oh, I want to be like VIktor Frankl. Oh, what a great experience you have. I want to be like him. And it's such an interesting quote. Very, very interesting.
No one wants to go to the concentration camp. That's all. I mean, I would take whatever it is to sleep for 3 hours for 100 years. But I hear but nobody, I think nobody just wants to go to the concentration camp. But I think the reason why I like this quote is because it helps me appreciate the writer. Because you read that book and it's hard to put yourself in the mind of the person who would go through that stuff and still find the book out of it. And I think that's what makes the book fascinating. Yeah. Because when you read the book, you're not reading it from it. It's clear-minded in terms of the ideas he's putting forward. And it's not, he's looking at people not as vessels of evil, but as people.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're in that situation, it's easy to look at someone and say, this person is the Antichrist. That's what 9 out of 10 people would do. This person is the Antichrist. But he's able to kind of separate that and say, this person is exhibiting X behavior, but this is why I think that they're exhibiting this kind of behavior. He's like psychoanalyzing all of them. And he's spot on. And the reason why I say he's spot on is because you read, that's why I keep going back to archetypes. You read the book and you can see people you've met in your life, not in a concentration camp, but in certain other circles. You're like, yeah, I've met this person. I know what this guy is talking about. I haven't been in a concentration camp, but I can see where this archetype leads. So I can see this kind of behavior. I have seen this kind of behavior. Right. So that's why I think one is a great quote, and that's why I think it makes the book because it gives you an insight into the writer's mind.
Yeah. Brilliant, very, very brilliant. Josh.
For me, it would be I'll just read it out. Man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life, and the secondary rationalization of instinctual drives. So, yeah. So essentially, what he says here is, so there's this quote that I got from someone I respect, and he's whatever you think will matter in the end, that's what matter now. And so linking it to this quote here. So when a lot of people go about their lives, so the rat race for money, for fame, for education, or for whatever it is you prioritize. Typically, if you discover a lot of those things are not as fulfilled as they will be when you eventually earn them. So that means there's something transcendent that should serve as our ultimate purpose, not the physical things that we can attain and not have to be right. So what lets us know here is your primary motivation for every decision you take in life will be what is involved as the ultimate, not some jobs I don't do. This job I need to make X amount of money on this. No, but what you think is the ultimate purpose for some different people have their different purposes. I mean, for Christians, it's different. I mean, to be able to preach to X amount of people, or philanthropists might be to salvage the situation of children from different four backgrounds. So when you identify that purpose, that should be the primary drive of your decisions. And everything should kind of feed into that purpose and build, instead of fitting it into your already existing life, should be a situation where that's the stronghold of your life and you build up things around it. That's how it is. So, go on.
So the question I have, I mean, I hear it, but one of the biggest struggles I mean, even after I've read this book several times, is I have like this question, which is, do we someone living his life right now, maybe purposeless, and when I mean purposeless, in your definition of what will matter at the end should matter now, which means a lot of people are thinking about end of the year. Some people are even thinking about their goal is as far as tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening, right? And we're here talking about something that is almost eternal, right?
Yeah.
So the question I had is, are you saying one should sit down and spend a particular period of their life just searching for meaning? And then when you grab that, then you run with it? Or do you find it on your way?
I think as humans, deliberate about what our meaning or our purpose is. Now, I feel like it is important. It's not something you stop your life to achieve, because, like you said, it's not a question you ask like something life asks of you. So it should be deliberate and conscious to identify it when it comes at you. Now, I think it's important to discover it daily because it has to form the foundation for every decision you make. So if you're deciding, for instance, the purpose or the meaning that you have used out life would be to change Nigerians for ecosystem assistance, for instance. And if you're taking a job in the United States, that doesn't, it might suit if you're going for 5 years to come back and bring the experience from there and apply it to your current to Nigerian situation. That's different. But if you're relocating and the ultimate purpose is to do something here, that's a decision that you have taken out of the purpose. So I think it's important to identify it early so that your decision making can kind of
So what do you say to people who don't have the privilege of having an overarching purpose together? Who don't have the privilege of having the time to make out an overarching purpose to their lives?
Time. How do you make time?
Like say a person who was raised in, say a kid now that is raised in Palestine, modern day Palestine, right? Whose day to day basically is just let me just survive. And let me just get through this.
So I think if you ask me, I think it's a question of knowledge, not time. For instance, Malala Yousafzai from is it Afghanistan? The lady who was shot in the face by the Taliban. So when she was in at the time in Afghanistan, she and her dad had found a way, because Taliban were against education of girls, female children, and things like that. But in the midst of that chaos and oppression, they found a way to create some sort of avenue for female children still being educated, even if it was not official, and even if it was frowned against by the tyrants of the day or their day. So, and that was something that's welled up from within her. Some people get this knowledge instinctively, others have to be taught. And so I think, because even this book, what this book presents to us is that we will not get perfect circumstance at every point that you desire it. So when you have this knowledge and when it finally settles into your subconscious that my purpose is bigger than me, yes, I need to survive. But in the midst of that survival, this is what means to look forward to something in the midst of survival, because you know that this is important and this can probably change the lives of people around me first and then people in generations to come. Because if people are not making sacrifices, obviously will not benefit from some things to benefit from today. And so that's how I see it. I don't see it from perspective of time, I see it from perspective of knowledge.
So I mean, I think the Franklin had even mentioned something about when he was going through the whole thing. He pictured himself teaching about his experiences in the concentration camp after the war ended. That was like a picture he had in his mind. That okay, once I'm done with this, I picture myself standing in front of people, explaining to them the psychology of going through constitutional camps and all whatnot. But you see, the reason why his question is important is, let me say this. Early this year, late last year to this year, there's something I do. I mean, I'm an Igbo guy, so I go to the village every December. And one of the things I learned from going to the village is that ambition is a privilege. It's a privilege that we have to talk about.
Yeah.
The fact that you can sit down here and say, I want to be this in 10 years is a privilege, because when I go to the village, I see people who just want to eat food that night, who just want to, they can't conceptualize next week or 2 weeks what life looks like. And every time I go to the village in December, I'm always reminded. The majority of the people, you get so
that's why I think the content of knowledge.
Yeah.
Not
So I want to say knowledge, but knowledge is, but I want to say privilege, because the reason is, I'll be honest with you, right? I mean, privilege may sound like you're living in some big castle, right? But it's something that I realized that there are, is it Maslow hierarchy of needs, they call it now? Yeah. Hierarchy of needs, right? So there are things you would never have to think about.
So this rebuttal, for lack of a better word, is from, we think your purpose, your overarching purpose has to be spectacular. It doesn't have to be spectacular. It just has to be meaningful. It has to be impactful. So for instance, this is the example in the village. Obviously, people probably can't dream to stop world hunger or anything like that. But we can think about, I've seen stories of people in the village who go about that. Oh, there's someone I know. You know what? I'm going to organize a group of boys and I'll resolve. Why? Because service to humanity. Highest service to humanity. So, and that's derived from love. So, love for humanity and service, which fears service. So, if you are in a situation where, and that was the same example with Malala, then that very quick, and you're like, I can't stand for people are my kin going through all this, so I'll do something about it. I think if you are aware, you're able to act despite this. And not everybody will act. Some people care about themselves, some people care about pleasure. So that's why there are different types of people around. And that's why things like this are important, because then you get to let people know that, yes, I know what's in front of you is seeing like the most important thing in the world, but there's something saying that you can look forward to.
I think it's good advice. I do think so. And I will say this again, like, I asked that question because I really wanted to know. But if you think about it, the book is an entire repudiation of, to an extent, the repudiation of the question, because there's no worse situation than being in a concentration. I was able to make it out right with it. But I still think that it takes a special person to read that. I think that there's a reason there's only one the Frankl. There'll probably be another kid from Palestine, but it will only be one kid from Palestine. I don't think who will come out of this thing and look up, because it's just a very hard proposition to make to people who are looking for food to eat, to start thinking of 10 years ahead. But I think it's very solid advice. I think it's a good advice. I think it's something that everybody ought to.
The thing is, I remember this time, this was years ago, I went to the village and I met a kid who was maybe like 10, 11, but he looked like he was 5, malnourishment and all. And, oh, do you go to school? He's like, school? No, he doesn't go to school. What does he go to school for? That what he wants to learn now. He's how to drive Okada. And I'm like, yeah, I tried. And I realized it was even hard for me. Like, it was hard for me to present, to put the picture of, see, there has to be something else, And he was like, him that he's not, that he wasn't learning how to drive Okada. That once he's 15, 17 now. And quite frankly, on my way back, because that happened in the market, I just thought about it. I was like, and I'm here. And at that time, I was in university. I was like, when I come out, I would do this in tech. I would have this certification. I was just, and I realized the only reason why this guy is saying this is because probably doesn't know what to eat next week. So the meaning thing is, while it's a good thing, we have to be conscious of the fact that there are people who cannot genuinely think about service to humanity. In as much as service to humanity is a great thing, but they can't think about it because they don't even have service to themselves. Because again, you can't pour from an empty cup. And yes, I understand that we should be all philanthropic, but at the end of the day, when you're in a constitutional camps, it's all man for himself. And if you're someone like VIktor Frankl who is thinking more than that, then you're one in like
you're thinking like
you're one in millions. Do you get what I'm saying? So but
This is a good way to kind of like, it's a good way to look forward to life.
and that's why for Franco, I think with the thing of knowledge, it was what he knew.
I know it has it. I know it has it.
Yeah.
It's muscle memory.
yeah, because he's a psychologist, so he has done psychoanalysis. He has probably not seen people. He has seen people in bad situations, not as bad as operation camps, but I'm sure he has seen those kind of things. Like,
But he was 24.
yeah, he was young. Well, fair.
So,
Fair.
so when you consider it, I think
But at the time, 24 was
solid.
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. So I would say that's why I appreciate what you're doing in this. It's I feel these things have a universal like a spiral effect. For lack of a better word, I'll just ask. So when you inform people of their duty or the need to hold on to greater meaning, it spirals and it affects the next person. The next person. For instance, the Frankl book has touched millions. Lives. And so obviously you cannot achieve ultimate truth in this. But what you can surely is change as much as you can and hope that those people geometrically do the same. Yeah. And so that's how I see it. So obviously I'm not oblivious to the fact that the people who have very little privileges. What you should focus on things like I said before that you feel which is inform people educate.
Oh, nice one. Great, but very, very great point. JP, can you beat this?
No, so pulling from his point of transcendence, this is my favorite quote. And what about man? Are you sure that the human world is a terminal point in the evolution of the cosmos? Is it not conceivable that there is still another dimension, a world beyond man's world, a world in which the question of an ultimate meaning of human suffering would find an answer? So, to put context, this was where he was talking about a baboon that is poked and prodded in a lab, right?
Oh yeah.
And like the baboon cannot comprehend what his purpose is. I mean, in his mind, he's probably remembering when he was swinging and probably thinking of bananas or something like that. So he cannot comprehend the full purpose. So two things come to mind, right? I feel like when it comes to purpose, there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who die without ever really thinking of purpose, or who die maybe thinking they didn't achieve their purpose. And there are people who die thinking that they did achieve their purpose, but we can never really know. And he said another thing again, that it's more about impact than what was that you said? Something
That's spectacular.
yeah, it doesn't have. So
spectacular.
somebody might die like not having that spectacular. Maybe he didn't achieve.
Maybe it's not even known.
Yeah, maybe it's not even known. But in the world to come, he will realize that the impact that his life had goes beyond what he ever thought. Yeah.
So it's interesting because VIktor Frankl said that he didn't want to even put his name in the book.
But and
I was thinking, like, how could you not want to do that? And it's interesting because I remember I've read books on the Holocaust. I've read articles, and he's the one that gives the most optimistic vibe of all of them. And the thing on transcendent purpose, and to be honest, I have struggled with it myself because there is this life after death thing, and they were like, are we even really sure of this thing? And there is this people honoring your death. Like for example, I remember there was something that wasn't there was a conversation I had with my mom, and she was like, "Oh yes, I'll just do it for my late father. I'll just do it for my late father." And I was like, do you live in your late father wherever he is? really cares. But I'm a thing which honor the dead. Exactly. Think I mean. So I'm like, Mom, I hear you, and I don't want to, you know, think. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but when you say I'm doing it for my late father, I'm like, do you genuinely believe that your late father, wherever he is, cares about you doing this for him? And she was like, oh well, I think he will like it. I'm like, he will if he's alive, but he's dead, and let's be a bit more realistic. And the reason I say that is sometimes we can focus a whole lot on the transcendent, and we forget the impact beside us. So so we look up a whole lot, and it's good, and it's fine. We can draw our purpose from there. But for me, if you draw a purpose from up, it must show around you.
Yeah.
Do you get? Because
People make for people make for giving tithes in church, like when you can just go and help someone who's on the street. So
Exactly. So I think transcendent depends largely on how you define it. So if you mix the definition to something you can't see, then maybe I would totally agree with your perspective here. But if transcendent is something beyond me, so that's how I interpret it. So when I read transcendent, I read something that's beyond my nose. I'm not just doing what fits me using. For instance, the example. Obviously, it doesn't really, but in showing honor to someone else, there's something that happens even in you. It's not a selfish act. It's an act where you are. So, for instance, if the VIktor in this book, he held on to his wife's name. Wife was already dead.
yeah, but his wife, but he knew after the fact. So that's another thing. Yeah.
His wife was, and he said, even if he had known, he said,
No, he was still yes.
So it's more of committing. And this permits me to respect another quote. It says, truth that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man aspires. He says, salvation of man is through love. Love. Yeah. So and love is, as I like to put it, is only evidence for service. Something for someone else that has no implication. And so that's how I also define a transcendent purpose. A purpose that serves the need of someone, not just yours.
Yeah, and so if I may add to that, he said that it's not about what you ask of life; it's what life asks of you. And I know this is an opinion, unpopular opinion, but I genuinely believe that life is not about you.
correct.
It's not like a lot of people are just like, okay, me. How will this benefit me? Like, but it's not about you. Like, as you said, transcendence. And yeah, I think that's why this is
Yeah.
Rascals.
That long. But to give a balance to the things people are saying, what I see from what you have said about the vision is that you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I know if you're going to give money to, like if someone give you shirts, look the clothes where they wear. Right. I genuinely believe that to even change the world, you have to first start from yourself. So for there to be a communal good, there has to be an individual good, and it is one of the reasons why most of the problems we face as society, we can solve at the unitary level, which is the family, right? Because what happens is that when people go into the society to find meaning, instead of them giving, either of it coming from themselves, that's what we have this problem. I'll give an example. When you is that a good example? Well, maybe. So when you look at the celebrity culture, where people celebrities are able to influence people who they have never met due to the age of the internet, and you meet the people who are under those influence are not even being influenced by their parents or people of close, and are you then you know that we as society we're getting to a stage in our so-called civility that we have to become careful. Where, for example, I remember this thing happened when I was in school, and the reason I bring this up is to highlight the importance of individualism in the grand scheme of the communal good. So some celebrity got divorced, and this lady in my school was crying and was bitter. I don't believe in love anymore. I said, oh, what do you mean? And she goes, this celebrity represents love. I said, your both parents have been married for like 25 years. Your uncles have been married and have good relationships and have good marriages. So how come you don't draw your meaning or whatever it is, from them? Why is it from people who are far away in America who, quite frankly, don't even care about who you are, do not have the same cultural values as you? So how are you? So I've come to realize that those things are the reasons why, at the end of the day, like when you look at when you look at the Titanic, when it was when the boat starts sinking and things get real, people who are, I know this is, you see it, like hierarchy just sets in. You're like, okay, you know what it's not hierarchy set because again, but again, this is even more than this is outside the scope of myself. So I think I have my own quote and then we'll just try and wrap up. The most important thing that I like quote that I find here is he said, when a man finds that it is his destiny to suffer, he will have to accept his suffering as his tax, his single and unique tax. He will have to acknowledge the fact that even in suffering, he is unique and alone in the universe. No one can relieve him of his suffering or suffer in his place. His unique opportunity lies in the way in which he bears his burden.
That's why I think it's the most powerful takeout from that book. Is the attitude towards suffering. The biggest, I think, is the most powerful.
How do you respond to when things go wrong? How do you respond to when things go right? Because that's another thing. How do you respond to when things go wrong?
Some of them when they call out, one of the guys was like, if I get home, my hands will see.
Yeah. And that's fascinating, like doing everything you've been through.
Yeah, but again, but this is how it is. There are people, and again, I have this hypothetical, who are going through a hard time today economically, and they are seeing our politicians embezzle and this corrupt, and they are saying, if I get to that position of power, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, yeah. We don't have the bag, but we don't. So that is the most impressive thing I read about, and the reason I think it's impressive, again, I think you cannot really understand Frankl's quote without understanding where he was. Like what if you even go to the historical sites in Rwanda where you do the genocide, you're seeing that people literally suffered. Like this is not a tale. Like I remember where he said people had to shave their heads, have to go into bathroom naked, and in all this he comes out from it and he's saying is if one should bear his suffering uniquely, and I'm like, that's a bold statement to make. So I think that's the thing that
there's another quote, but
you could just have
let me just
you and maybe you have another quote you want to
so just to quickly read it. To draw an analogy, a man's suffering is similar to the behavior of gas. If a certain quantity of gas is pumped into an empty chamber, it will fill the chamber completely and evenly, no matter how big the chamber. Thus, suffering completely fills the human soul and conscious mind, no matter whether the suffering is great or little. Therefore, the size of human suffering is absolutely relative.
Well, that's a deep quote.
Something to ask, I would take from that is what's the highest emotion? Is love or fear or suffering or whatever you want to do? Like, what is the biggest emotion? What really fills the room? Does love fill the room in a way that fear or suffering fills the room? I think that's the
I also the what I take out from that, and again, this is something that I really do not want. It's a bit controversial, but I'll say is that everybody, no matter who they are or whatever class you want to put them in, has something that they have to bear.
Yeah.
And it's a suffering that they have to bear.
It's sufficient for them.
And it's sufficient for them. So again, this is highly controversial, right? For example, and I'm going to talk about the whole civil rights, the Black Lives Matter, why the whole thing that happened in the US, and the whole social justice thing. And I keep telling people that some of us, your suffering may be a suffering of class, finances. Another person's suffering may be suffering of beauty and how they look. Another person's suffering may be suffering like you have someone in Afghanistan, you have someone else in Ukraine. Someone else is living in a $5 billion apartment right now, and his biggest suffering is that his father is not calling him. and that for him
It's sufficient.
is sufficient. It's huge. He's going to one man. Another person may be just that. I know my dad has his friend, he's a doctor, brilliant man, and he's in his 80s. His biggest regret in life, or rather biggest suffering, is that none of his kids care about him. Now, this one is not poor. He doesn't need their money. It's just the fact that he wants, at least once in a while, his kids to call him. And for him, that is, he will pay anything. He will pay any amount to have them. So when we that's why I don't like going excuse me to use this term, bounds for suffering. You know, like go for bounds for let me be in your position. And sometimes it may seem there's no way you have a Lamborghini, you have a Ferrari. And yes, I'm not going to talk about money and happiness and all whatnot. But my point is, everybody's suffering is sufficient for him, and that is something that I find very, very, very interesting. It's what I find very interesting. So I think we have done an hour, if not less. So thank you so much. This is more than a book, to be honest. It's a life experience, and thank you for being here. So for the month of October at Nebula, we're going to be reading Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. It's a great book. I haven't read it myself, so we'll figure out by the end of the month what it is. So thank you, Joshua. Thank you,
Thank you.
And thank you, Emeka.
Thank you for having me.
See you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.